Hi, Martin Luther King. How are you today?
Hi, I'm very fine, thank you. Very blessed.
Nice to hear that. Could you tell me a little bit about your childhood?
Well, during my childhood, I wasn't very active in any sports at all. It was the time of the segregation, and I had my best friends who were white boys. We used to play a lot when we were younger, and one day their mother came out and said to me, "You can't play with the king boy anymore because of the segregation." And they were too old and didn't want to make any trouble, so I followed the advice and I started to spend a lot of time on my own. And then
So you were living in a white neighborhood, or was it mostly blacks, or was it mixed?
it was mixed, but as I said, my friends were white, and the segregation got to me, if you can put it like that. And so I decided to focus on my studies. So it was then when I came to high school, I skipped the ninth and 12th grade, and I started to focus on my schoolwork a lot.
And that helped you really. I mean, you have made it.
Yeah, that helped me very much because I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for that. And I wouldn't be able to influence people as I done because we all got to understand that we live in a nation where everybody is equal and nobody deserves special treatment, whether you're black or white.
Did you get a lot of pressure from your parents to go and study and focus on school and stuff?
My father was a reverend, and I also thought of becoming a reverend. I am a reverend now, but I decided to continue in college and get my degrees and PhDs and doctors so I could learn more about this progress that was happening to our nation, the segregation, how everything is occurred sociologically, and many other things.
Thank you. So, King, could you tell me about your present life today?
Well, I have four beautiful, healthy children: Yolanda, Martin, Dexter, and Bernice Scott King. And I am continuing with spreading the message of my dream, where we will get past the segregation time and everybody will find each other as equal and to live a free life.
Do you believe that we will have an equal society in the future? Do you think it's possible?
Yeah, I truly think so. I truly think it's possible because if I didn't think so, I wouldn't go through with this. And I think we're just in a phase, as every other phases we have been in, but this one is one that will become go for the great.
Do you think your dream will come through whilst you're living on this earth right now?
Yeah, I hope so. I never know what God has planned for me, but I hope so.
God bless you, King.
The same year as Martin Luther King was born, the Great Depression started. As he grew up, USA suffered an unemployment of 25% at its peak. The Great Depression was partly an imitation of a stock bubble, and it spread all over the world. Along with the Great Depression, the segregation of black and white people took place in USA. They were separated and were, for example, not allowed to attend the same schools, shop in the same stores, and sit next to each other on the bus. By the end of the 1930s, almost all countries had recovered from the Great Depression and World War II arose. Growing up in such a horrible economic situation and an unequal society followed by a world war affected Martin Luther King in many ways. The suffering he witnessed during his childhood was one of the reasons for why he wanted the society to change. As Martin Luther King moved on to college, the Cold War arose with a competition between the capitalistic USA and communist Soviet Union. The American fear of communism made them believe that if one country fell for it, the rest also would. Martin Luther King was most active during the 1960s. It was a time of insecurity and theories about a third world war including nuclear weapons. USA was spending big amounts of money on the Vietnam War, and many colonized countries became independent from the new imperialism.
Hello, allow me to present myself. I am Mrs. Rosa Parks, and I was born the 4th of February 1913 in Alabama. I am a normal Afro-American woman, and I both were and am very committed to working with the rights of Afro-Americans. And the most famous moment in my life occurred after a long day of work, and I was really tired, and I stepped on the bus to ride home. And back then we had a rule that the first rows they were reserved for the white passengers. The bus filled up with people, and soon there were too many white passengers. Not everyone had a seat. So the bus driver got up and he moved the sign that declared which department it was, and he said, "Get up." And when he stepped towards us, when he waved his hand and ordered us to get up of our seats, I felt determination cover my body like a quilt on a winter night. I refused to move. I wouldn't move for anything. He called the police, but I refused to budge. And so I got arrested. And so I got charged, and this led to a series of events that have changed life for all black people out there. And I'm glad I could do such a big thing and that I could change life. And it was through an event called the Montgomery Bus Boycott, that I met Martin Luther King. And he was a very kind man, with a lot of kind words. And I remember him calling me one of the finest citizens of Montgomery. And he was one of the biggest leaders in the Montgomery bus boycott. And unfortunately, he got to take big strokes for this. His house was bombed in January that year, but he kept fighting. He was a brave young man. And he also wrote in his book from 1958, Stride Toward Freedom, that Parks's arrest was the precipitating factor rather than the cause of the protest. The cause lay deep in the record of similar injustices, he stated, and actually no one can understand the action of Mrs. Parks unless he realizes that eventually the cup of endurance runs over and the human personality cries out, "I can't take it no longer." And this is what happened. Martin is a dear friend of mine, and I am very impressed by his ideas and his work. But I am also proud to know that he was inspired by my act when he started to fight for racial equality. It is good to know that one of the finest young men of our country is looking up to me the way I look up to him. Henry David Thoreau was an American writer and philosophist, and he was born 1817 in Massachusetts. He is most known for the essay Civil Disobedience, which is a centerpiece for anarchists, and he states the wish to have a government that does not govern. He also believed in naturalism and racial equality, and he fought for this by writing, demonstrating, and making his voice heard, not fighting for his voice. And this inspired a lot of people, amongst them Leo Tolstoy and Mahatma Gandhi, and also later Martin Luther King. I think that King got inspired by him through Gandhi because they were very good friends, and I'm going to talk about this later. But he felt very inspired by his thoughts of peaceful opposition. Mahatma Gandhi, or Mohandas Gandhi, was born the 2nd of October 1869 in Gujarat, in India. And he was a lawyer, he was a politician, and he was a spiritual leader. And he worked very hard to free India from imperialism. And he came from a very wealthy family and educated to a lawyer in Great Britain, and then he came to India where he wasn't allowed to become a lawyer and he was not as much worth. So he thought this was very weird. He didn't think this was supposed to happen, so he decided to demonstrate against imperialism, and he believed in something called Satyagraha, which is a philosophy that is about the truth and to make resistance through active, non-violent resistance. And this brought India to their independence. And he inspired Martin Luther King through a lecture which someone else held at the Crosser Theological Seminary in Pennsylvania, where King studied, and he was immediately very inspired by this. So he started to read a lot of books about Gandhi and his ideas, and he decided that, oh my God, these methods, we can use them here to obtain our civil rights. And he uh, especially liked the words, through our pain we will make them see their injustice. He wanted the American government to see how the black people suffered and that they weren't different from the white people in the country, and therefore he used nonviolent resistance. And he also traveled to India in 1957, and he met Mahatma Gandhi once in his lifetime. I think it was Mahatma Gandhi or it was his son. And after that trip, his wife says that he was constantly thought of how to apply the Gandhian principles in America. And therefore, he joined up with the Reverend Ralph David Abernathy, and they formed the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And the Southern Christian Leadership Conference was all about using nonviolence to fight for civil rights and racial equality. And they adapted a motto which said that not one hair of the head of one person should be harmed. And with this, they wanted to prove that you didn't have to hurt someone to get your point across. And this was all inspired by Gandhi. And people even today debate that if we didn't have Gandhi, if Gandhi's achievements hadn't been, we wouldn't have had, Martin Luther King wouldn't have been as known. Maybe he would still have fought for racial equality. He most likely would, but very different methods would be used, and he probably wouldn't have reached the same things as he did now.
There were big consequences being a black man and standing up for freedom of his race during Dr. Martin Luther King's time. The major consequence led to Dr. King's death, which was terrible, but he made some great achievements during his time, which held. He helped to build better relationships between races, and he defended the Americans with African descent and fought for their rights. He was the leader of the first nonviolent African American movement. Martin Luther King published several books where he highlighted the oppression faced by black and their brutal conditions. Stride Towards Freedom, The Measure of a Man are some of his publications. He was the youngest recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, when he was 35 years old. He used the money from the prize to further civil rights causes. Martin Luther King struggled for improvement, and he surely did succeed.
I have a dream that one day my 4 children will live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream.
And I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. And we hold this truth to be self-evident and that all men are created equal.